Good afternoon and good morning to our friends from in the USA. Welcome to this commemorative session dedicated to the life of Jerzy Limon. I'm Bojka Sokolova from the University of Notre Dame in England.
Welcome from me too. I'm Janice Valls-Russell of University Paul Valéry Montpellier in France.
We wish to thank the Gdansk Shakespeare Theatre and our colleagues Nicoleta Cimpoeș of the University of Worcester and Marta Gibinska of the Jagiellonian University in Krakow for helping organize this event. And we are gathered here in this virtual space to celebrate the life of our friend and colleague Jerzy Limon. Like everyone present, I never thought that we will be getting together for such commemoration. Only a few months ago, in great secrecy, some of us here, as well as others who are now on YouTube, were engaged in writing chapters for a festschrift for his 70th birthday. The folder containing the text I wrote for the volume now incongruously contains these notes and Jerzy's last token, a thank you email. I met Jerzy for the first time one April in the 1980s in front of Collegium Maius in Krakow, in a spot of southern sunshine which appeared through a break in the clouds on an else rather miserable rainy day. It is a strangely graphic memory. Nearly 40 years have passed since, and I realized that the sense of brightness has always accompanied my meetings with him. It was about that time, in the mid-80s, that Jerzy opened the subject of Shakespeare studies in a new direction and gave it a specifically European twist. His book, A Gentleman of a Company, English Players in Central and Eastern Europe, 1590-1660, was a game changer. And it was followed by much else. Of course, the crowning achievement of this Renaissance man, a description which fully befits Jerzy, is this treasure of theatre, Gdański Teatr Szekspirowski, his grand act, which future generations of scholars and people from across the world to whom culture is important will look up to and cherish. I wonder what Jerzy would have said if he could see and hear us today. The wonderful poster created by the theatre, ironical, expressive, theatrical, goes some way in answering this question. But here we are. Death has no sense of humor. And the only way to challenge it is to remember. I would now ask Janice to say a few words.
Thank you, Bojka. Good morning and good afternoon to all. I first met Jerzy during the Avignon Festival in July 2008. We'd been in touch about an article on the Worcester Group's Hamlet for Cahiers Elisabethan. On that hot afternoon in Avignon, with the cicadas chirping loudly, Jerzy spoke about what had started out as his one-man quest to build a theatre in Gdansk as a home for the Gdansk Shakespeare Festival. We were in touch again when he and Andrzej Wajda designed a Shakespeare happening in the city of Gdansk. Then we met in Paris, Montpellier, Worcester, and Gdansk, of course. The poster beautifully captures that combination of humor, often self-deprecatory, and vital commitment to causes. Fun, urbane, immensely cultured, attentive to others, concerned about the present, yet looking beyond the borders towards the future. Jerzy embodied, in my view, the ideal European. And I think it is that European dimension within the global world of Shakespeare that participants and attendees will be celebrating today in this event organized by the Dance Shakespeare Theatre. The two round tables have been designed around just two of the many areas in which he excelled. The first, chaired by Nicoletta Schindbusch, will share with us memories of and insights into Jerzy as a man of theatre. What did it mean for a theatre practitioner to work with Jerzy in his theatre, his city, and on the festival circuit? We are very grateful to Joanna Śnieżko of the Shakespeare Theatre, to Ala and Grzegorz Bral, dramaturg and director of the Polish company Song of the Goat, the Bulgarian director Javor Gurdev, the Belgian director Luc Perceval, and Philip Parr, artistic director and co-founder of Parabola. The second roundtable, chaired by Marta Gebinska, focuses on Jerzy the Shakespeare scholar and reviews some of his most important contributions to the field. We also hope to hear something about Jerzy as a teacher. Marta has gathered around her academics from the universities of Notre Dame and Delaware, from the Shakespeare Institute in Stratford-upon-Avon, and from the universities of Berlin, Danzig, Hull, and Szeged. And because they all have a lot to say, I shall immediately hand over to Nicoletta for the first round table.
Third time welcome on behalf of the organizers of today's event. It is my pleasure to open the first panel celebrating the life and work of Jerzy Limon in the memory of some of his dear friends. I would like to share, with your permission, a dear memory, my first encounter with Jerzy. I was a first-timer in Gdansk at the time, where I landed to spend my first summer holiday as a UK academic. As it was with Jerzy, we got talking at the end of a show, which was performing in the festival that summer. And not before long, Jerzy was sharing his fondness of Romania and Romania's Shakespeare Festival. Confessing that I was yet to attend that festival, he simply made it happen, as he naturally walked us towards the man whom he promptly introduced, my friend Emil, director of Craiova International Shakespeare Festival. A couple of decades later, I think of this encounter and its consequences as Jerzy's talent and bigger plan. And it is this talent and this bigger plan that made Shakespeare at home in Gdansk, that embraced so naturally and so eruditedly diverse points of view and practices. And last but not least, his talent and bigger plan of bringing people together. This panel will share memories of work and encounters with Jerzy as the man of theatre. And I'd like to invite first actor, director, and teacher Grzegorz Bral, perhaps most known to many of you as founder of Song of the Goat Theatre, the Wrocław-based company that has toured the world and captivated spectators with its productions steeped in anthropological explorations and an original acting method based on the integration of what he calls the entire arsenal of acting tools, motoric, musical, verbal, experiential, into an organic unity through coordination technique. Over to you, Grzegorz, to share your encounters and memories of Jerzy Limon.
Thank you, Nicoletta, and good afternoon and good morning to everybody. It is, I nearly didn't want to participate in a meeting like this because the voice still gets stuck in my throat when I think about passing of Jerzy. It is unthoughtful, unbelievable. My life is now full of grief and sadness because we also lost a friend, very close friend. We also lost a scholar, a humanist, a contemporary Leonardo da Vinci, whose vision was much broader than probably many of our life's visions. And on the first day, when Alicia told me about Jerzy, I just couldn't believe. I just couldn't believe, and I felt here that big part of my brain is suddenly missing, and that part of my brain is a personality that affected so many thousands of people in the world in the most profound way. You know, it's like Prometheus, who brings light to people and who's living in Poland on a rock, being poked and probably often devastated by wild vulture of politics and desires and corruption and so on. And Jerzy was an amazing example of somebody who, like Prometheus, still offered hope, light, wisdom to all of us. And he was not only a teacher, a mentor, he was somebody whose loss the whole world will greatly mourn, because there's not many people like him. I've known him for, I don't know, probably 15, 20 years. I don't exactly recall the first time I've met him. I feel like I've known him always. Also because I am from Tree City, like Alicia, we're both from Tree City, like Jerzy is from Tree City. I was studying the same university, and although I never had a privilege to participate in Jerzy's classes or lectures, his name was ever present in my life. And I tell you, trying to do theater for the past 25 years myself in Poland, and seeing what Jerzy was able to achieve, this is unique. This is absolutely unique. I'm not sure how on European scale this would be unique, but in Poland, this is unique. I think he is the only one who, after the Second World War, built from the scratch a theater in Poland. He's the only one. And I don't think there is any other person in Poland who would dare to build a theater like he did. So I have to say, I lost a friend, I lost a mentor, I lost lots of life in my life. And I have to say, some deaths are maybe not so significant, although death is always significant. But Jerzy's death is more than just a loss for the whole humanity. Is the end of 21st century for me. And I mean it. I cry every time I speak about him, and there's nothing I can do about this. So I better stop here. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this wonderful celebration. And I just wanted to say, I dearly loved Jerzy and respect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grzegorz, for articulating our communal grief, which was at the origin of trying to get together and have the opportunity to share this extraordinary way in which Jerzy has changed the lives of many, like everyone present here today. Ala, would you like to continue today's panel? I will introduce you very briefly to some of our spectators who are watching us both via the YouTube channel and through the Facebook channel, who might not know a lot about your work with Jerzy. Alicia Bra is a dramaturg, an actor, a poet, a songwriter, who's been working as the head of the creative department of Song of the Goat Theatre. Her collaborations with Jerzy took place in a number of capacities, not least as a researcher and collaborator in creating the Two Windows Theatre in Gdansk. We're looking forward to hearing your memories and your encounters with Jerzy that you feel you can share today.
Hello. First of all, thank you for inviting us for this occasion. Thank you for letting us also the circumstances when we can share, in my case, a lot of memories and a lot of ways that our lives crossed with Professor Jerzy Limon, with Jerzy. I first met Jerzy Limon, Professor Jerzy Limon, at the university in Gdańsk when he was giving a series of lectures on Shakespeare. And from the first moment, I saw this passion and vigorous and energetic feeling towards Shakespeare in Professor. I knew that he is a exceptional human, exceptional scholar, exceptional man. Also because he was the one that, in a way, he infected me with the Shakespeare, also by his passion. And I have to say, maybe I will go a little bit in my personal experiences, because actually I have in my mind the day when Professor came and asked me to start collaboration with Gdańsk Shakespeare Theatre, and his thought about his first thought, his idea of Two Windows Theatre was so crazy and so amazing that I couldn't believe that in Poland we can actually have this kind of mind in between of all of us. You know, like he always had this very wide vision of what's possible, or in other words, nothing were impossible for Jerzy. And I'm really, really grateful, because actually he gave me and all my colleagues a lot of freedom, which is not so obvious when you're building such a big institution, when you're running such a big institution like Gdańsk Teatr Szekspirowski. We always had this feeling that we can share all of our thoughts, inspirations, and yes, and Jerzy was very astute, and he wanted to know what we actually mean, what we want, what we have in mind. He was the one who always make jokes about Shakespeare, about his life. He shared with us all the stories. I remember, like, we were thinking about the quote, punchline for another edition. It was the most hilarious moment in our group, because we all could just share our thoughts, and always at the end it ended on Jerzy idea, but only because it was the most brilliant one. I remember when we all watched Sex in a City, and the addition was Sex in a City. So that was so amazing to have this mix of the presence of a professor, of an amazing mind, of a scholar with the huge knowledge, and at the same time, very light, very bright person who always was bringing a light towards everyone. And I remember that his face was so light and full of joy when he was talking about his daughter Julia, and he was very happy all the time when she achieved something. And it's worth to mention that Julia was a volunteer quite often during the festivals, and yes, and that was also so beautiful to see their relation that was so friendly. They were like friends. She trusted him with no limits, and they were so cheerful with each other. I also remember, like, very often we were speaking about. We were talking about the situation in Poland or the condition of women in the theater, and Jerzy always said, "I'm a pure feminist. In my opinion, women should rule the world. The world would be much better. And my wife," he used to say, "is the most brilliant and amazing person. And also she earned much more than me." so I'm the lucky one that my wife is a successful businesswoman. So yeah, so I remember all those stories. I have so many. I know that the time is very limited, but for me it's a loss of very long friendship, very long relation, and inspiration, the empathy and energy was huge always when we were with Professor Limon. And that's actually, I could say just that it was a very powerful, huge, but in the same time very kind force that pushed me personally to achieve my dreams, to try myself. And yes, I think that he will always be in my heart, in my mind. It's very difficult to say something to close my speech, because I don't know what words should come next, because it's like ongoing story, and I'm really grateful that I could meet Jerzy and Professor, and such an amazing person. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ola, for so honestly sharing the bag full of memories, and for reminding us about Jerzy's kindness and Jerzy's playfulness, whatever the matter was, and his capacity to make the impossible very possible, and naturally, and sort of very easily. And unbeknown to so many of us, how many other projects he has sort of planted, and I don't know how much longer we will be kind of unpacking things and thinking back of where they've actually started. I'd like to invite Philip Parr, a long-term friend and collaborator with Jerzy, Philip is artistic director of Parabola and co-director of the York International Shakespeare Festival. And he's one of the council members of the European Shakespeare Festivals network. As you probably know, Philip and his work, just a quick sort of reminder in half a sentence that his work always focuses on multicultural, intercultural and community theatre making and co-creating. You may have been lucky enough to see some of these projects around the world, in Gdansk perhaps, or in other places, and even luckier than some of us to have been privy to his latest collaboration with Gdansk and with Jerzy in the Creative Europe project, Shaking the Walls. The floor is yours, Philip.
Thank you, Nicoletta. Thank you for the invitation to speak. I didn't have any second thoughts about doing this, but I had to write something down because I'm not sure, to be honest, that I'm going to get through it. So we'll try. I met Jerzy for the first time about 15 years ago in Gdansk at the festival. I'd just started as the director of the Shakespeare Festival in Bath, and I was having a rapid year of immersion into the world of European Shakespeare, thanks largely to Joanna Śnieżko. It was at the beginning of a drawing together of the various festivals to form what would become the European Shakespeare Festivals Network, which Jerzy would be elected to chair. We will miss him greatly in that role. He is first among equals there. It was an adventure then to come to Gdansk from London for that first festival. No direct flights, certainly no cheap flights. So a flight and then the train from Warsaw and arrival to a new strange city. And the festival was totally inspiring in its breadth of companies and styles. For someone brought up on the English-speaking world of Shakespeare, it was a rapid education into what Shakespeare could be, what Shakespeare should be. And I've been to every festival since, even if just for a day or two. It's an essential annual part of the process of refreshing the soul. It's something that we all need. In my reflections, I wondered how to speak about Jerzy today. I think of him as a colleague and friend, a mentor, and as a guide. As a colleague, Jerzy was a man of immense and wide-ranging knowledge. Time spent with him was always valuable and precious because there was always something to learn, something new to discover, to be sent away, invigorated and curious to explore whatever it was that had been discussed. I suspect Jerzy didn't tolerate time wasters. I've seen him negotiate his way out of many of those conversations, but he always had time and loyalty for those he valued and respected. I was honored to call him a friend and to be his friend. Over the years, we've sat in pubs, in restaurants, hotel lobbies, in the foyers of theatres where we've watched performances together, at meeting tables, in his office for a glass. There's often been a glass of something involved. We've walked together through the streets of cities across Europe. Conversation and ideas have been the heart of our time together. The master and the student, the disciple, kindred spirits. A phone call from Jerzy was always the prelude to an adventure. It would mean that something had percolated within his thinking and was now about to break forth, and you were invited along to be part of the journey. Part of what would inevitably be an adventure. The wind was in the sail and you were stayed for it. It was time to get on board. Not everything succeeded, of course, but so often the journey led to surprising places. And on the very many occasions when it all went through and it came to a triumphant conclusion, there was always the sense of reward for having been invited, permitted to be part of something rich and rare. My first trip to make work in Gdansk, Jerzy contacted me, asked if I could meet him for breakfast in London just before he rushed to Heathrow for a flight. And I say rushed, but while Jerzy was always moving, always mercurial, he never seemed rushed, always seemed to use time to the full and to have its measure. He was here for a meeting with the Prince of Wales, so I felt in good company. And he asked me if I could make a project about Shakespeare and technology and bring it to the festival that year. And the relationship has continued for more than a decade, making and sharing work in Gdansk. I joke that I've probably slept in the Shakespeare Theatre more than anyone else. And that's not because I fall asleep in performances, but because of Jerzy's vision to make each of the dressing rooms a little hotel where artists can stay. That possibility makes meetings happen more smoothly and more frequently, and from that come more collaborations. These little practical elements built into that amazing building are bricks of the theatre too, just like those of the walls, the bricks that build a creative powerhouse, more than just a theatre. Being in the city and part of it, making work, and I've been fortunate to be there many times to make work in Gdańsk and for meetings with the team. You realize how much Jerzy is at the heart of things. And more than just Shakespeare, he's part of the fabric, the human powerhouse in the city. It's been visible as the theatre has moved from vision to reality, as the festival team have moved from office to office around the city, always getting slightly bigger and doing more with each move, with the establishment of innovative courses at the university around arts administration. And it's in the marvel that is the Two Windows Theatre. I feel very fortunate as an artist that he's had faith in what I might want to do, particularly around community and the democratization of Shakespeare, because Jerzy trusted artists. He was their friend. He was their supporter. I think of Jerzy as a guide and a teacher because he taught naturally all the time and wanted to impart knowledge. The last time we met in November, we were driving to his house and he was explaining the significance of its location in Kasubia. And of course, hearing it from him, there were no dry facts. I needed to go out and find out more. And he would always be enthusiastic to share what he had found when he found new discoveries. How many times would a conversation begin excitedly with Jerzy saying, I found this, or when I was researching, I came across. But chiefly when I think about what I know about Shakespeare, the plays, the history, I realize how much has been inspired by things that Jerzy has said or referenced. And also, of course, by reading his books. They're fine research, but they're exciting reading. But you learn just by being in his presence, by sitting at his feet, not just in terms of facts and information, but in understanding how to develop an idea, to take an inspiration, that momentary flash of light that comes to all of us, swift as a shadow, and turn it into a practical possibility. Our most recent collaboration on the Creative Europe project, Shaking the Walls, is such a project, starting from the briefest ideas, inspired by the walls of the theatre and the city wall it reflects, and manifesting itself 3 years later in an outburst of creative, social, artistic exploration and new, exciting working relationships with partners and new friends all the way across Europe, all from one man's mind. I think of him as a mentor because I've always felt that Jerzy was a friend to turn to with a question, both professionally and personally, and that he was someone who would give logical, practical, supportive advice. He did so for me on many occasions, and my life has been richer for it. Earlier this week, I was speaking with my colleague in York, Tom Bird, who knew Jerzy well through his time at Shakespeare's Globe, and we reminisced, recalling coinciding in unusual places around the world, and talked about ideas of loss and legacy and about it being our responsibility now, our job to get on with it, to take ideas forward. What would Jerzy ask of us, we asked ourselves? Well, he would want us to keep going, to strive for that same goal of exploration informed by curiosity, guided by bravery, never constrained by complacency or timidity. When I heard the desperately sad news of his passing, I wanted to come to Gdańsk, to be in the city, to console with friends, to sit and talk and reminisce, to stand on the walls of the theatre, to make acknowledgement and to mark the loss. It would have been a kind of pilgrimage, such as pilgrims make to Canterbury or Santiago de Compostela and to Mecca. The purpose of pilgrimage is to refresh us for the future, to rekindle our purpose. As Shakespeareans, of course, we see Stratford as a central destination, the birthplace that indisputably is, the place we should visit to say we were there, as we visit Shakespeare's Globe to say we understand. It is down to Jerzy that I think we should see Gdańsk and the Shakespeare Theatre as our place of inspiration, of aspiration, the place we make pilgrimage to, because it empowers us to be bold, to be brave, to become leaders, and to think more deeply about who we are and what we do. For those who knew Jerzy, it will be a place we come to and remember. For those who come from now on, it stands as an example of how to achieve your vision. of one man's determination to create something extraordinary. And for all of us, it stands both as an inspiration and a challenge. Once you come within its walls, the Shakespeare Theatre feels like a home, a place where you meet with friends. You can see it in the foyer before a performance as we gather to go in. And in all the offices, you always have to make sure you have allowed enough time for saying hello to everyone as you walk down the corridors. That sense of belonging is not about the building, but it's simply because of the spirit that it's been given by Jerzy's leadership. And that spirit is contained within the people, within the wonderful, warm team of people that he gathered around him, who've been part of this amazing journey, some for many years. I know that they're, like me, going to be missing their leader and friend very much. And I send them a hug, and I look forward to the time when we can sit together and share our thoughts. Thank you, Jerzy, for leading us all on our shared journey.
Thank you, Philip, for reminding us that the way in which Jerzy has touched our lives has done it so naturally and also so promisingly that we all feel that we can move forward in some way yet unknown to us, but with a script that perhaps Jerzy continues to write from where he's sort of looking at us. Thank you for reminding us about the natural place for pilgrimage to meet Shakespeare and make Shakespeare, the wonderful space of the Gdansk Shakespeare Theatre, which he has ensured is a legacy where we can meet and we can remember and we can make things happen. Thank you for reminding us how important every meeting with Jerzy was and how emotional we feel and bereft of not having the opportunity to do that in immediate physical sense. But also to take hope from the fact that there have been so many walls that Jerzy has taught us how to break, and the fact that we're here together today in the comforting space of the theatre, virtual as it may be. It's a wonderful play that Jerzy choreographed and has left us. I'd like to introduce another dear friend of Jerzy's, Luc Perceval, who started his career as an actor at the National Theatre of Antwerp. And he left to found his own company where he started experimenting with rehearsing methods and developed his directorial approach and techniques, which to Jerzy came as no surprise. They include and integrate yoga and meditation techniques, parts of who Luc is and what he does. There isn't enough time to mention how many things and how many awards Luc has received. Just in a sentence, I'd like to say that he has been director of the National Theatre in Antwerp, director in residence at the Schaubühne in Berlin, leading director of the Thalia Theatre in Hamburg, and since 2018, director in residence at the National Theatre in Ghent. You would probably know his work in the theatre, in opera, as well as in documentary film. But he's here today to share some of his memories as a friend of Jerzy's. Over to you.
Thank you, and hello everybody. And first of all, I want to express my gratitude to being invited here and to say some words about my encounter with Jerzy Limon. I was in Warsaw when the news reached me that Jerzy died. And as so many of us, that touched me profoundly. Not that we were so close with each other. We actually only had met each other occasionally. But Jerzy was one of the people I thought was actually immortal, because he had this enormous enthusiasm, this enormous energy. And the first time I met him, I think it was 20 years ago when I started working in Germany, where I had staged Wars of the Roses, and he invited me with another, because I staged a lot of Shakespeare dramas in Germany, and invited it to Gdansk. And I think the first time I met him was in Munich 20 years ago. And the first thing that occurred to me was not only his perfect Oxford accent he had, but also the fact that he, as a scholar, he was so open-minded. That was actually very, certainly at that moment in Germany, where my own Shakespeare stagings were very contested. He was the guy who was open and curious and enthusiastic and encouraging. And so we invited, from that moment, many performances of me in Gdansk. And I remember one day we were there a few years later with Hamlet. And he said the next day, please stay one day extra. I want to show you something. And he led me into the city, and he showed some, as far as I remember at that time, kind of wasteland, a kind of old building where there were bulldozers around. And he said, here, I'm going to create my globe. This is going to be the Shakespeare Theatre. And at that moment, you couldn't see anything of it. It was just a dream. And I thought, wow, when he's able to realize this, like he was able to connect me with so many different Shakespeare interpretations throughout the world, because when you met him, you felt a connection with, let's say, the spirit of all people who were busy with Shakespeare, who were dealing with these subjects, with this world, with this universe, actually. And so we're standing there in the middle of Gdansk, and he was walking me around this imaginary theater that would come, showing me the plans. And I was in great admiration, because I thought, when he is managing when this is one day realized, this will be a miracle, actually, because it's a pure dream. It's the pure result of a man with passion and a dream. And indeed, years later, I don't know exactly when, he invited me. He sent me, first of all, this prospect he had made about the theater, and he showed me realization and the pictures, and invited me to Gdansk to show at last the theater, and we were talking about plans, about maybe staging there and so on. And I was really very much touched and inspired that somebody was sharing at such a huge level his passion. And I still believe, and he's an example of it, that these people who are sharing their passion, like he did because for me he realized actually a kind of Taj Mahal in the middle of Gdansk. It's also more or less, let's say, this black form it has, and he's spreading actually an enormous love into the world. He spread enormous love in the world, and that's why he still remains for me immortal, actually. So, and he is and was very, 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 very inspiring for me. Yeah. You've shut off your microphone, yeah.
Yes. it's got a bit of a delay to come back. Thank you so much for sharing some extraordinary memories of Jerzy's passion and natural way of describing what he saw in front of his eyes. But as you said, it was an empty space at that particular point. And the versatility and playfulness with which he could construct the multiple levels of that theatre, and then leave you like a child in front of a Christmas tree, trying to imagine what kind of theatre could happen in a place like that. Literally dumbstruck by that kind of power of transfiguring, as reconstructing the reality in front of your eyes. I think many of us have been on this sort of pilgrimage with Jerzy in various points in time, various spaces that he would bring to life and have a very strong vision, as if for him the things have already happened. The way in which he talked about the space where this theatre will happen, the way in which he knew exactly how the stage will function and how the seats will move and all the other technical sides when it was a complete building site, just a lot of concrete and metal bars and hard hats that we had to wear, when he very proudly declaimed from various points of the construction site, this is where the roof will open. This is the third level where such and such will happen. This is the space of the stage. And we did feel like people taken on this journey with him. What was it like to work as a director in spaces that Jerzy sort of projected onto us?
Well, I never had the chance to work in this space. There was one performance invited, one performance I made invited there, but unfortunately I couldn't join. It was the Russian Macbeth. But yeah, but so I can't witness that. But I can imagine that his spirit is part of that space. Absolutely. Yeah.
That is possibly one of the challenges that he's left you, look, to
okay.
that space and try to do justice to what Jerzy has envisioned.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Thank you very much again for the wonderful reminders of all the many things that Jerzy has done and the kind of changes that he's made in us. I'd like to invite Javor Gurdev to share some of his memories and encounters with Jerzy as a person who's had the challenge and the opportunity to work in this space that sort of feels and breathes as Jerzy. Javor is director, actor, screenwriter, translator, playwright, with a double sort of training coming from philosophy and theatre directing. And he's one, if not the foremost directors of his native Bulgaria. His works, which span a variety of genres and media, don't be surprised if you hear that he's working in theatre, in television, in film, in opera, in radio, and so on, has been performed in dozens of countries and have traveled from Sofia to Berlin to Paris to Bern to Moscow to Lisbon to Rotterdam to Utrecht to Gdansk, of course. He would hopefully share with us some of the memories of being in the Gdansk Shakespeare Theatre and mounting no least but Hamlet as a production in a newly opened Shakespeare Theatre. Over to you, Javor.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. This is very important for me because Jerzy Limon is somebody who's really, really important to me, and I think of him as a friend, and I knew him only for the last 7 years. Actually, I know him since 2013, but this experience for me is unique because the first time he came to Bulgaria, to Sofia, to see the production of Hamlet at the National Theatre here, was really crucial for me, because the exchange that we had after the performance and our conversation for me was probably the most important conversation I had with someone in a position of a critic or a curator or theatrical expert. And this, of course, is due to the specifics of his personality. He was indeed a Renaissance man, and I was so much impressed by his philological competence on one side and his theatrical competence on the other side. Our society is very fragmented now. We have everywhere this compartmentization, and people are specialists in this or that, and his expertise, Shakespearean, scholar expertise on one side, understanding everything about Shakespeare, about his language, about his iambic pentameter, about his translations in different languages on one side, and then his expertise in contemporary theater, real expertise of a man of contemporary theater. I think this was the unique quality of his personality, because this was the only night in which I had a talk with the person who could relate to virtually everything that was done in this interpretation of Hamlet, because he knows, of course, perfectly the original of the text. Then he can freely relate to a third language translation of the play in another Slavic language that he understands well enough, a translation of his colleague into Bulgarian, Professor Alexander Shurbanov. But this knowledge actually gave him the possibility to see practically everything, every little connotation, every decision, directorial decision or actor's decision, every little change in the text, including those changes that are just made to shorten the text and to preserve the iambic pentameter. So he knew everything about every monologue, everything about every scene, and I was just struck because everything that I did was kind of articulated. And when you have a conversation with such person, only then you understand that everything that you imagined as a director is in fact there. Because before that, I couldn't know that there was nobody to refer in a way that I could really understand everything that is there is understandable, or someone can understand it. And this is why I was so impressed by him, and I felt him as a friend since then, because he really knew everything. The tragic situation of an artist who does things and people like them or dislike them, and feeling that they don't get everything there. And then somebody who comes and sees everything and articulates it. This was just great, and I was so impressed. Then he invited me to see the Gdansk Shakespeare Theatre that was yet in construction in Gdansk. I went there, and during the construction work, the stage wasn't really there. You have these concrete structures only, and no theater yet. And we were staying there in the theater. He was telling me of every part of the stage mechanics that is going to be present there in a year. And we were actually discussing how to do the stage adaptation before there was a stage at all. We were there in the concrete and construction work going on with helmets there, and we were discussing all this. And it was really great because he believed in what was going to happen. He was, this kind of person believing into the things that are to happen, into the coming things, into the coming community, so to say, if I can quote Agamben here. So this feeling of his is this is so so inspiring that you can stand right next to a person who believes that everything is going to happen the best possible way, that you actually take from his energy and start to believe that this is going to happen. I was very realistic about it, because it's very hard for an Eastern European production, a big one, with more than 50 people on tour, more than 34 actors, and then technical staff, to visit any festival, because it's a lot of people, it's a lot of money to be found, and but he believed in that, and the very fact that he believed it actually inspired me too, and I was working very hard for that tour, and we had the opportunity to be there in the first year in the new building of the theater, and I just want to tell you about an event that was really something metaphysical about our Hamlet there in Gdańsk. I was hoping since the very beginning that it is going to be possible for me to open the roof during the performance, and it was actually the first time for the roof to be used in a performance, and I had a very special idea about the moment, how to do it there in Gdańsk in a different manner than in Sofia, and I was really hoping for that. But there's this technical thing about the theater, that if you have the wind with the speed more than 50 kilometers per hour, as far as I remember, I'm not sure about the 30 or 40 kilometers per hour, the security system of the roof of the theater just blocks the roof, and then it cannot be opened. So during our rehearsals, the wind was always over 40 kilometers per hour, over 40. So we couldn't, during the adaptation and the rehearsals, during the night of rehearsals and the day before, we couldn't actually open the roof at all. And I was so disappointed by this fact that I just told the technical guys, okay, guys, you're gonna be there on the roof, and when the moment comes, and the moment was the monologue of Claudius, this the most important monologue of Claudius, his attempt to pray. When the moment comes, I'm going to be on the radio, and I'm just going to ask you 30 seconds in advance, what's the speed of the wind? Can we open the roof? And in the beginning, the wind was like over 50 kilometers per hour. But when the moment came, and a little bit before that moment, I just called them and they said, Javor, you know what's happening? It's like 6 kilometers lower than we can open the roof. Yeah. And the actor, Mariusz Kurkinski, the actor who played Claudius, he didn't know that this is going to happen. And I told him, okay, stand by, 4, 3, 2, 1, open. And then they opened this famous roof, and something of metaphysical quality happened within the performance. It started to open, and the actor was very emotional, and he sensed it, he saw it, and he just saw the sky, and it got cold. All the audience felt this cold. It was like the Hamlet's father's spirit coming. It was a very special moment, and this put the actor into this particular moment in very special circumstances, something that you can experience once in a lifetime. And everyone backstage was really, really emotional about it, and this was such a special moment for every one of us, that everyone remembers this moment and I think we are going to remember it for all of our lives. And this is why I'm so grateful to Jerzy, and I'm so really sorry about his death. And I think he was a man that could do much more for Polish culture, for Shakespeare reception, because this is very important. You know, many people think that Shakespeare is something that is far behind, something that is already dead. You know, this is the popular notion. And men like Jerzy, they have this power to convince people that this is not the fact. And he believed so much in contemporary readings of Shakespeare, contemporary interpretations, that actually inspired everyone to do them. So I'm really, really grateful to these men, and all our crew. I would like to say that all our crew is very grateful to him. And something more, I just had an exchange with the Tiger Lilies band. They also had their Denmark production directed by Martin Tulinius, who sadly died a few years ago too. But they were there at your festival, I think twice at this festival. They also loved Jerzy Limon a lot. And from Martin Jacques and all the band of the Tiger Lily and all the people around them, I just want to give their condolences too. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Javo, for reminiscing about your encounters with Jerzy and feeling the force of his energy to make theatre happen, as you said, when there wasn't a stage on which to perform. So that says quite a lot about his capacity, his vision, and his magic touch, not least in making the winds propitious and calmer. So we have those transcendental experiences in the theatre. So a very kind of memorable touch that I suppose every time we would go and see that roof opening, we'll know that it is Jerzy's hand at work, allowing us to do that. I'd like to invite our last but not least friend of Jerzy's to share some of her memories and encounters in the many roles that Jerzy played in Gdansk. So it falls on Joanna Śnieżko to bring us back to Gdansk, the home of Shakespeare, the home of Shakespeare that Jerzy so generously shared, as all of us have already mentioned, whether through a brief encounter in a corridor, moving from one venue to the other, whether in a 1 second of respite, having a coffee, and always on the way to the next adventure. Joanna trained in cultural anthropology and cultural projects management, and has been at the heart of all things Shakespeare in Gdansk, and a close working partner to Jerzy's main work of turning dreams into reality. She worked for Teatrum Gdańskie Foundation and the Gdansk Shakespeare Theatre as organizational director of the Gdansk Shakespeare Festival, and she has been instrumental in creating with Jerzy the European Shakespeare Festivals network. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicoletta. Thank you for inviting me to this very, very special meeting. What I would like to say, I owe the adventure of my life to Jerzy Limon, the Gdańsk Shakespeare Festival. I'm grateful to him, to the chance to co-create it for more than 20 years. And meet so many fantastic people and experience so many extraordinary theater performances here in Gdańsk. I also owe him many extraordinary challenges. And I'm grateful for this trust. I think he gave all of us sense of self-agency, faith that you can want more and more. You can make your dreams come true. He was the best example of that. I also think that he knew how to create the team that could fulfill the dreams, new projects, his ideas. And I think we all will miss his moments of illumination, unusual, surprising ideas that suddenly appeared in his mind at 3 a.m. in the morning. And then he wanted to share it with us by text message or an email. And then it took real shape thanks to the work of the entire team. He claimed that he did not like to travel, and yet he was very attracted to what was new, undiscovered in the theater. He liked also to follow new paths, including those in his own thoughts, inventing new ideas. He invented so many names: Two Windows Theater, Exploring Europe, Taking the Walls, and many, many others. After all, he traveled. He traveled to Armenia, Georgia, Iran, and many other countries, from where we received extraordinary works. He also greatly appreciated European theater, but the most searching theater with new interpretations of Shakespeare dramas. Theater, for him, theater art was the intellectual challenge. That was the most attractive for him. During the festival, we were confronting the works of well-known international companies and famous directors with Shakespeare productions nominated to Golden Earring Award. And that was something very, very special and I think important that happened during the festival, thanks to him. He appreciated a lot works of the artists who are with us right now. I mean, Luke Percival, who was with us with Othello and then with Hamlet and Macbeth, and of course, Song of the Goats, and Javor Gardiev with so very, very special Hamlet. Jerzy was critical, but at the same time was open to our ideas and new projects. He became convinced to the new formula of Shakespeare of our festival's Fringe. It is also the name invented by him. He emphasized the importance of the experiment, new searches. He wanted very much the festival was such a platform of research and discovery for emerging artists. His wish was to support emerging artists. He accepted the idea of creating the European Shakespeare Festival Network with great enthusiasm and openness, and thanks to him, it was created. Nicoletta asked me to tell about how it happened. So actually, the idea came to me in 2006, and I just shared this idea to him, and he said he found it very, very, very good idea. So he decided to send me to Bath, and actually, thanks to that, I was able to meet Philip Barr, who is with us right now, and then he was our very, very special guest, and I would say, no, not guest, but the member of the team. He was with us in Gdańsk so many times. Afterwards, I went to Craiova, and it was decided that we really want to create the network. I remember I was calling him from Craiova to Gdańsk, just reporting, yes, it will happen. We will have the network. They are the people who really want to create the network here, and we have the partner in Hungary, in Germany. He was so happy. He supported that idea so much, and actually, as I said, he was the man who just had this ability to realize every idea, you know. So it happened. The foundation finally was registered here in Gdańsk, and it has the headquarters in Gdańsk, and we have so many made festivals, colleagues all over Europe, from Denmark, from Armenia, from Serbia, from Macedonia, from Romania, from Hungary, from Great Britain, of course. What else I would like to say? Jerzy Limon strongly believed that the memory would remain, and that important moments and anniversaries should be celebrated. We would love to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the festival together with him. He invented a book that would be a collection of memories of people associated with the festival. He strongly believed that the memory must be preserved. I think he would appreciate our meeting today. We really want to believe that our team is able to continue his work. The Gdańsk Shakespeare Festival will continue and hopefully grow in strength. I believe European Shakespeare Festival Network will develop this activity too. Many great events will take place at the Gdańsk Shakespeare Theatre, in the theatre which is his great work. Jerzy Limon is the man of the Gdańsk Shakespeare Theatre. It's so special space. I would like to share with you a very special moment that happened yesterday. We felt, somehow we even felt his presence yesterday. We were celebrating Shakespeare's birthday, but that was the event dedicated fully to his memory. But you know what happened just after? It was beautiful. We were sharing memories. We were trying to go deeper to his philosophy, to his work as the writer, as the theater man, as the mentor, as the Renaissance man. There were some artists with us. And you know what happened just after this meeting? We realized that two dancers in this pandemic time were so happy to be in such a beautiful space that they decided to dance. They were not even they didn't realize that we watched them on the camera. But can you imagine? After all, they were dancing nearly 40 minutes just with such a pleasure. I think it was something in that theater, so special atmosphere. And the building itself is giving such a space for artist freedom and joy. But what I want to say at the end, Shakespeare theater will continue to develop thanks to you. Thanks to you, dear artists, dear scholars, dear friends of the professor. We feel great support. We feel your great support. And thank you. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Joanna, for closing the first panel we've had that managed to share some beautiful memories of many encounters with Jerzy that each of us has had I'd like to conclude this panel with a very short letter I have received from the director of the International Shakespeare Festival in Craiova, who talks in the same way very fondly of Jerzy. He's known Jerzy since the early days of having the idea of having a Shakespeare festival anywhere, whether in Poland or in Romania, and striking a wonderful friendship through Shakespeare. Shakespeare was what brought them together, that strengthened their relationship when the two festivals were founded within a few years, and then later on this relationship became even stronger when the European Shakespeare Festival Network was founded in 2010, in a way formalizing this mobility and kind of general sharing of Shakespeare across Europe that Jerzy had as a vision. Every single time Emil Borogina was reunited with Jerzy, whether that was in Gdansk, whether that was in Craiova, in Gyula, or any other festival, they grew closer. Jerzy was always very warm, very welcoming, very witty, and always enjoying these encounters. Every single time one encountered Jerzy, he had a new idea to share, he had a new project to fulfill. And of course, the network and all the other Shakespeare festivals benefited from that. Of course, his main wish was to, and his main project was the Gdansk Shakespeare Theatre. And I remember how proud and excited he was to take us to the footprint of where the theatre was going to be built. And then the same joy with which he guided us through all the corridors and venues of the wonderful theatre on the festival edition when the theatre was inaugurated in 2014. This is, I think, the strongest memory that I would keep of Jerzy. I am convinced, and I trust that all of us will feel him close to us every time we are going to be in Gdansk in the proximity of that theatre, because he will be inhabiting that place forever. So without further ado, I'm going to bring to a close this panel, thanking once again our panelists, Grzegorz and Ala Bral, Philip Parr, Luke Percival, Javor Gerdev, and Joanna Śnieżko, for reminding us that Jerzy has been our guide and remains our guide in whatever the journey will lead us to, and looking forward to the next potential celebrations of Jerzy's life and continuation of his work. Thank you very much for sharing memories and for being together, as we have been through exciting events that Jerzy shared with us at this time when we're all grieving his departure. In terms of technicalities, before we say goodbye, there'll be a short break, and then we are all invited to attend the second panel where scholars and friends of Jerzy would share their memories of Jerzy as a scholar. Thank you once again very much, organizers and participants in the panel.
Can you hear me, everybody?
Yes, Jay.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Ready. Now, I hope you can hear me. Hello, everybody. I think we still have a minute before we start.
Marta, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice. You see, I'm too nervous. I'm terribly sorry about that. So I don't know at what point I...
Please just wait a minute.
Yes. Thank you, Marta. I'm not muted, really. No. Well, I should be okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Now, Marta, can I go on? Okay, I hope no, not yet. All right. Marta is our technical director, I think.
Yes. Yes,
Okay,
start now.
Can I start now? Yes, now I can start again, right? Thank you. Sorry about this false start. Sorry. So I want to begin the introductions of the speaker with Jerzy Halliow, professor of the Delaware University, chair of board of the Delaware University Press, editor of many plays of Shakespeare, and therefore he has so many grateful students of Shakespeare behind him, a long throng of people who owe a lot to him in Shakespeare studies at all levels. Jerzy Halliow, together with Jerzy, edited a collection of essays back in 1993, Shakespeare and His Contemporaries, Eastern and Central European Studies, a very important book, among others, for Polish scholars. Right. Professor Michael Dobson, a professor of Shakespeare Studies at the University of Birmingham, director of the Shakespeare Institute, earlier working for Birkbeck College, University of London, where he established a specific program of cooperating with the Globe, which is a great and new thing, very important for joining scholarship and theatre studies, and making Shakespeare part of a living presence in scholarly life. Michael Dobson lectures at Oxford, Harvard, University of Illinois in Chicago, UCLA, Lund, Sorbonne, you name it. He is an international wizard in Shakespeare studies. Thank you, Mike. Pavel Drabek, Professor Pavel Drabek from the University of Hull, started his career at the University of Olomouc in the Czech Republic, and he still cooperates with Czech theatres and opera, has had a direct experience of working with radio theatre, opera, translating texts for them and adapting texts on them. He's author of many essays on Shakespeare in Czech translations, and also on the career and plays of John Fletcher. Professor Peter Holland. Peter Holland, thank you very much for waking up and joining us. Right, Professor Peter Holland is now at the Notre Dame University. He's a central figure in performance-oriented Shakespeare studies and Shakespeare criticism. Used to be in Cambridge. Many of us know that. He's a former director of Shakespeare's Institute at Stratford-upon-Avon and of the University of Birmingham. Co-editor of many very important Shakespeare series and publishing enterprises like Oxford Shakespeare Topics or Oxford or Shakespeare Survey, sorry, Peter. Sorry about that. Duet Soni, I hope I pronounce your very difficult name, György, in Hungarian. Hungarian was one of the languages I always wanted to learn, but never really mastered. Professor Sonny is from the University of Szeged, and he's also visiting professor at the Central European University, located in Budapest and Vienna. He has published a series of very interesting books, at the heart of which are studies of Western esotericism, of the magic, of the symbolic, and of the iconic, with such catching titles as, for example, Gli Angeli di John Dee, which I think is a wonderful thing, Cultural History of Angels, Magic, and Ascension on High. So we must always look up when we talked with György. Thank you for joining us. Professor Tomasz Wiśniewski from Gdańsk. Tomasz took over the Department of Visual Arts from the hands of Jerzy. He's the founder of the Between Festival of Beckett Research Group, which works in Gdańsk. Published a very important monograph on Samuel Beckett, also published a lot about Polish experimental theater groups like Wierszalin and Gardzienice. He is also the regional managing editor for the Theatre Times, member of the board of the Polish Association of the Study of English, and a member of the program board of the Gdańsk Shakespeare Theatre. Last but not least, Marta Nowicka, who works in the educational department of the Gdańsk Theatre, has worked for a long time and has done a lot of magic and wonderful things, trying to educate young people, and not only young people, also mature people, alerting them to what theatre is and what Shakespeare is. She is on board of the Polish Shakespeare Association, currently studying for her PhD at the University of Gdańsk. And she's also, at the moment, the current president of the International Network of Managers of Culture called Oracle. Thank you all. Thank you for being together. And now I would like to invite Jay to speak.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here among so many distinguished friends of Judek, as I always call him, and many of you do know that that is the name he usually goes by among his friends. My friendship with Judek and Justina goes back at least 50 years, when we, especially when we were in residence at the Folger Shakespeare Library back in the late 1980s, where we spent many evenings together talking about everything. And I became very well educated about Poland, which I had never visited up until then. But within a very short time, I found myself traveling to Gdańsk to visit with Judek and Justina. And our friendship grew closer and closer. He stayed at our home several times with Justina or by himself, but because I was able to arrange for him to teach at the University of Delaware, a real coup for the University of Delaware, I may say. And I gave some lectures, and my wife did also when we traveled to Gdańsk. Judek, I think I should really speak about two things. First of all, his plans for the theater that he eventually built, and for the festival that he arranged even before then, in the summers, beginning from the end of July to the middle of August. Let me start there. His idea was to bring companies from literally all over the world to present Shakespeare, present Shakespeare's plays in ways that many of us in the Anglo-American sphere had never seen. And we learned a great deal about how adaptable Shakespeare was. Some of us might have thought that it was no longer Shakespeare that we were watching, but maybe German or French or Chinese versions of Shakespeare. Nevertheless, as Judith liked to tell me, the plays that we saw in the US or UK were tame by comparison, and he was certainly correct about that. They were much more adventuresome, and I was amazed at how many very interesting plays and companies he brought from abroad, usually about half a dozen in each summer festival. Actually, his plans to build a theater began about the time I met him, actually. He was, I think one of his first books was to describe the visitors from England in the early 17th century, players who performed in docks. There wasn't a theater, it was a fencing school where they performed. And his idea was to build a replica of that on that original site of a theater very much like the ones where the players from England first performed. I actually saw some of the original plans for such a theater. This went on for many years, but what actually happened, as you all know, is a quite marvelous theater was built on approximately the same site, but looked nothing like the fencing school that was there in the early 17th century. If some of you attended, as I did, the opening of that theater, it was a marvelous experience. I don't know of any other theater in the world that can be both an indoor and an outdoor theater, because the roof of the theater that was built actually opened. Now, on the opening night, I think there was a lot of trouble getting the theater roof to open, but nevertheless, we knew that the theater was very versatile. And in years subsequently, we watched a number of excellent performances in that theater. Judith was, as I tried to indicate, not only an excellent scholar, as his book on the Mask, for example, that I'm very proud to say the University of Delaware published, was an extraordinary accomplishment in showing what the different kinds of masks were available in the 17th century, both the mask and performance, and the mask that was never intended to be performed, but at least not on a stage, but in one's mind, one's imagination. His book, and I have a copy of it here, The Mask of Stuart Culture, was published in 1990. I was then, as Marta indicated, involved with the University of Delaware Press, which I think at that time I was still chairing the editorial committee. This was a great accomplishment for Judith and for the University of Delaware Press, which had actually only been in existence for about, I would say about 15 years, and rapidly became one of the major sources of publication of Shakespeareana, thanks to Judith and many other scholars. I will end by saying that I feel very deeply the loss of Judith, not only as a scholar and an entrepreneur, but as a very dear and close friend. It was indeed a great shock to learn of his passing, and I mourn him very deeply.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you very much. I remember meeting you for the first time through Jurek. Yes. Thank you very much. Professor Michael Dobson. Michael,
Yes.
The floor is yours. Yes.
Thank you, Marta. And I'd say it was a pleasure to be here if I didn't wish that this occasion weren't happening. You know, maybe in 20 years' time, one might have been able to stand it. But we all came to depend on Jerzy for the kind of energy that he poured into everything he did and every social encounter he had, which is one of the things that, you know, one's almost surprised to realize he was mortal at all. He had such youth and energy and commitment to every moment he was in. He was like a kind of walking Renaissance. He wasn't content with studying this extraordinary period in Northern Europe when all these things had been happening in popular culture and high culture and intellectual life and science. He was determined that he was going to relive it and have his share of it and make it happen again. And I want to mention one aspect of Jerzy's life, which otherwise might not come up, which is his commitment to rock music as the new art form that was happening in his lifetime, that he wasn't going to miss out on, because it's something we talked a lot about, something we both indulged. I don't know how many of you watched the live streaming of Jerzy's funeral, and if you could see, for crying, the pictures that came up among all those photographs from Jerzy's life of his first band, that rock band he was in 1969, on the beach at Gdynia, looking like the Beatles had looked 5 years earlier, except much better looking. He was a beautiful man, Jerzy, and you know, Justina, you know, she's a stunning woman that looks like Helena Bonham Carter did when she was young, except much cleverer. But Jerzy carried that energy, that sense of wanting to be in the moment and in what was happening in the moment, that commitment to staging shows that would light people up and would use everything that was alive in our time, as well as everything he could bring from his knowledge of the Renaissance. He talked, I mean, we talked various things at different times that didn't happen. He wanted to synchronize the dates of the biennial Shakespeare conference in Stratford, so that everybody who'd come from all over the world to the Stratford conference could then fly on to Gdansk and go to the Dominican Fair and go to the Gdansk Festival and see his theatre. We talked about having a big helicopter land on the Institute lawn, though alas, this didn't happen. And he talked about flying my band to Gdansk so that we could play on the roof of the theatre, like the Beatles had on Carnaby Street. And alas, that didn't happen either. Traveling with an amplifier on your lap on Ryanair just couldn't be done. But that opening ceremony, which Jay was remembering, that was Jerzy's court masque. He didn't only study the court masque, he staged one. Yeah. Those symbolically costumed people sort of assaulted the theatre to open it up. All those symbolic gestures when the whole audience were invited onto the stage and were then welcomed by the actors instead of the other way around. Astonishing. I mean, we aren't going to see anything like that again. Yeah, at first, when he used to talk to me about his plans for the theatre, I didn't really think it was ever going to happen, to be honest. I only really started believing in it when I went over there, as did Jay, in 2013, to see all those productions of Titus Andronicus, including the brilliant production by Jan Platter, and was taken around the foundations and heard that little disagreement between Jerzy and Justina about what color the bricks should be and whether it was too depressing and too much like the secret police building next door if it had these dark bricks. And then, yeah, clearly it was happening. And then in 2014, there we were. As with Jay, Jerzy talked with me a lot about his tastes in live Shakespeare. And as Jay says, most Anglophone productions he found too reverential. They played most of the words in the order in which they're printed. They were too long, and as you say, they were tame, they were boring. As far as Jerzy was concerned, he wanted 2-hour shows that cut to the chase. But a lot of European shows he found too far from Shakespeare, that they were just using the Shakespeare play as a pretext for something else altogether. So he was always sort of divided between these two traditions. And I like to think that I partly solved this problem, at least briefly, by introducing to a company of which I'm a trustee called Flute Theatre, who do very stylized, very cut productions of Shakespeare, and who brought their Hamlet, a little 2-hour Hamlet, to the festival in Gdansk in 2015. It was a wonderful occasion. The last time that I just stayed up drinking and talking and didn't bother to go to bed because I had a flight the next day. And I remember I wound up carrying a chandelier home on my lap on Ryanair on that occasion. But Jerzy liked that. It was sculpted, it was tight, it was very, very now, as well as a very complex response to a Renaissance text. Yeah, he was absolutely committed to the fact that thinking about Renaissance texts, understanding Renaissance culture, and being in ours weren't to be separated any more than low culture and high culture. Those were in that period or in ours were to be separated. And I think those are some of the things. I mean, quite apart from the fact that there are very few people who've been that accomplished and prolific as scholars who have also been that important in the live theatre. I mean, can you think of anyone? He's not going to be forgotten. He's going to remain a major figure for his body of published work and for what he's left us in Gdansk, in that festival, in that playhouse. The last time I saw him in the flesh was when we got him to Stratford in 2019 to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award, the Pragnell Award, which is sort of for lifetime services to Shakespeare, which usually frankly, it goes to the Royal Shakespeare Company, who like to give Lifetime Achievement Awards to people like Peter Brook, Peter Hall, John Barton, Janet Suzman, Peggy Ashcroft, great veterans of the RSC. Just occasionally, we can persuade them to recognize the global importance of Shakespeare and the extraordinary creativity of people outside Stratford-upon-Avon. And Jerzy was one of those times, and I'm so glad we got him to Stratford. And we had a fabulous weekend, and he will be remembered in the same breath as people like Hall and Brooke, no question. He's left us with a theatre that is not an antiquarian monument, that's not ridiculously trendy, but that is in our time and their time, and is in Gdansk and is for the whole world. And yeah, I know we all already miss him very, very much.
Thank you, Michael. Yes, it's true that the theatre is not just a building, although the bricks are important and the staircases and the white marble and everything, but it's the soul of the theatre, what the theatre meant for everybody who came to it. That's his greatest achievement, I think. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Pavel Drabek, what about you?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me to speak on this occasion. When I learned of Jerzy Limon's passing from my friend Anna from Poznań, I was truly shocked. I'm sure that everyone must have been, and everyone still is, because as Michael just said, Jerzy was a youthful soul, someone who was present in the moment. And in the previous panel, Yavor Gabriev said that Jerzy was allowing to make Shakespeare present. And I'm so glad for this opportunity to remember Jerzy and make him present, because he has left a lot. And Joanna in the previous panel said that Jerzy always cared for the memory and what remains. So I would like to kind of think a little bit about what the memory is and what remains. Firstly, I would like to express my profound sympathies and condolences to the family and friends and their colleagues. And I'm just very grateful for the chance of having met this wonderful man. And that this event that was organized by Shakespeare Theatre Shakespeare Theatre in Gdańsk could happen. And thank you very much also for everyone who's watching this, for bringing Jerzy's memory into the present. I would like to start with a brief quote from Jerzy's book, The Chemistry of Theatre, with the subtitle Performativity of Time, which I think is important because of the ways in which the time magic happens. Time in performance becomes split. It is the real present of the performer, the same as the time of the spectator, and the created fictional present time of the figure on stage. However, both of these present times, while appearing in the shared present time of the audience, belong to different streams. And the opportunity that we have now of remembering is also an act of performing, bringing to the present what has remained, what is remaining after Jerzy. I would like to start with a personal memory. When I met Jerzy for the first time, it was during a similar event dedicated to a colleague of ours. And of course, I had read Gentlemen of the Company, which was an eye-opening engagement in not only theatre history and archival, the most meticulous archival research, but also the acute awareness of practical theatre, irreverential to Shakespeare as the great national poet, but something that was putting not only England and London on the map, but the rest of Europe, and in this way the rest of the world. And Jerzy's vision of making Shakespeare present in this world transnationally is crucial. And I remember that meeting, which was about 15 years ago. I engaged in a debate with him, which was quite heated in good part. Jerzy has a wonderful, shrewd sense of humor. And as Janice Russell said in the previous panel, it was fun and often self-deprecatory. So we had a debate, very heated one. And I disagreed with one of the things that he has written, and he disagreed with my view. The following was that I got an invitation to come and do a workshop in next year's Gdańsk Festival, which for me remains as the emblem of the generosity and the agency that he was giving to his collaborators, as Joanna Snieszko-Misterek said in the previous panel. And I think this is a very important legacy that Jerzy has, the generosity towards his colleagues, and the fact that he was not only making Shakespeare present, but that he was empowering people around him to share ideas, disagree with them, whether that is sufficiently reverential as Shakespeare or perhaps too revolutionary as a Shakespeare performance. So what remains is, of course, his scholarly legacy, the wonderful books that Jay mentioned, and a number of other people, the kind of intellectual, artistic experience of the theatre, combining history, theory, and the present moment, very importantly. What also remains, of course, is the theatre, the community of people that he built together around himself. And of course, the incredible vision of building the Shakespeare Theatre in Gdańsk, which is a legacy, as Michael said, that will be here for forever, certainly in theatre history. And one thing that I remember and kind of keep thinking of when I think of Jerzy is his shrewd eye, because he always seemed to look with this kind of twinkle in his eye, as if seeing something more than we were talking about. And there was always a witty comment. There was a kind of Promethean quality, as Grzegorz Braul called it in the previous panel, of seeing a little bit more, seeing beyond the present moment. So while we are at the present moment, it's several time frames that we are operating in, and the ability to look and see acutely, incisively, and shrewdly is one of the great kind of legacies that remain personally. But this is a legacy of someone who was not only a historian, a theatre maker and rock musician, and but also a great theorist that is the one able to see beyond. And I would say that the visionary quality and the ability to give momentum to his vision is something that is unique. And I'm very glad that we could be the spectators of this vision, and also that we have been the community of his shrewd eye. So thank you.
Thank you, Pavel. Thank you for making us aware that what he did with his great book about the gentleman of a company really has a continuation in the very fact that we are together now. Thank you. I would like now to call on Professor Manfred Pfister. Manfred, you have to unmute your mic. Manfred.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now it's okay. Thank you. Yes, yes, Manfred.
I'm always traumatized in front of gadgetry of that kind. Yeah.
No, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Hello to everybody, and thank you, Marta, for organizing all that so smoothly and making it possible that we share our memories and our pity for Jurek. Shall I call him with Hamlet a fellow of infinite jest? Well, then I would immediately have to add a fellow of infinite jest and wit and knowledge and insight and sense. I have known Jurek as long as Hamlet had known Yorick. Indeed, I first met Jerzy so long ago that I don't remember the year, only the occasion, a British Council seminar in Cambridge. It must have been in the late 1980s, because then I knew already his name as the author of a book which changed quite literally our mental and cultural map. His dissertation, normally not a genre of writing to make a big splash with. His dissertation, his gentleman of a company, English players in Central and Eastern Europe, had just been published by Cambridge University Press and had redrawn for all of the Shakespeareans in painstaking archival work the Baltic roots of the English comedianten across Europe, relocating them further east along the Baltic coast, with his own hometown Gdansk as the nodal point. On myself, our encounter had a similarly route-changing effect. Henceforth, the contacts made for me by that great and generous academic go-between Jurek have also drawn me eastward on my Shakespearean quests, to Poznan, Turin, Krakow, and again, to Gdansk as the emergent center of Shakespearean studies and performances in Poland and Eastern Europe. Jurek's discovery had, of course, an even deeper, long-lasting impact on his career, as he soon moved from archival reconstruction to archaeological digging, and from there to organizing festivals and conferences on site to prepare the actual rebuilding of the Shakespeare Theatre in Gdansk, and finally to stage live performances on it, engaging for all this with indefatigable and irresistible persuasion the support of the city magistrates of Gdansk, the voivodeship of Pomerania, the Polish government, the European Union in Brussels, not to mention His Royal Highness Prince Charles in England. My first encounter with his bright intelligence, personal charm, and catching passion for our scholarly pursuits was already a revelation to me, and made me follow his further development from theater historian to theorist of theater and drama to practicing man of the theater with bated breath. And not only from afar, through his numerous articles and books, but in the growing intimacy of friendship. He was indeed my first Polish friend ever, and he deepened not only my understanding of the role of Shakespeare in his culture, but unraveled for me, at the same time, the traumatic complexities of German-Polish relations with the tinge of Middle European melancholy that was so unique with him. Having no Polish, alas, I never managed to read his literary writings, which, as he explained to me, revolve around the multi-layered and plurilingual culture of Gdansk. He did that in a number of excursions and in and around Gdansk, and he even set me on to trace in the unique resources of the Pomeranian Library an Jurek-style Polish, German, English, and Italian network involving the South Italian expatriate, literally stranded at Gdansk, the Marchese Doria, a Bandello novella, a German Fastnachtsspiel performed at the Gdansk Grammar School, and Shakespeare's history cycles. Jurek was a great, elegantly social organizer, and as such he managed to invent ever new occasions in Gdansk and in Berlin to share our passion for the theater. I had the pleasure to attend half a dozen of his conferences, putting the Gdansk Globe project on the map. And he organized with me in Berlin a conference on types of theatrical performances, in which he shared with us his important recent research on the Stuart Court Mouse. And when he talked about performance, he talked about it with an awareness what was going on at the same time, at our time, in performance art and in the public media, let's say. The last time we met was in spring 2018, when we went to view together at the Berlin Deutsche Theater Karen Henkel's Shakespearean Rome for a possible guest performance of the Gdansk Globe, indeed a global adaptation of Shakespeare's plays about Rome and a conflation, as it were, of the entire Roman history. Before that, I had spent a quarter of a year at his invitation in Gdansk, teaching at the university there, comparing notes on our various projects, and spending much of our free time with his lovely family. And the absolute climax of our spring there, attending at the splendid opening night of the Gdansk Globe. This treasure of a theater, together with his writings, will remain a lasting monument, perhaps even more so than his Festschrift, This Treasure of a Theater, beautifully produced by his friends, students and colleagues for his 70th birthday in 2020. To be one of its contributors is a great honor to me, though one overshadowed now by the sadness for our loss. He was indeed, among all the colleagues I have come across, the one I admired most, both of his research, for his research achievements and his vintage personal charm, for straddling academic, literary, and theatrical work, and being a great teacher both to his students and to his colleagues on how to conjoin history, theory, and practice. And here is my last farewell to him. Catulus's Carmen 101, Ave atque vale, translated by Aubrey Beardsley into English and translated from there by me into German for polyglot Jurek as a tribute of one to another translator, Emilio Fabro. by ways remote and distant waters sped, brother, to thy sad graveside I'm come, that I may give the last gifts to the dead, and vainly parley with thine ashes dumb. Since she, who now bestows and now denies, hath taken thee, hapless brother, from mine eyes. But lo, these gifts, the heirlooms of past years, are made sad things to brace thy coffin shell. Take them, all drenched with a brother's tears, and, brother, for all time, hail and farewell. Auf Wegen weit und über ferne Wogen, komm, Bruder, ich zu deinem düstern Grab. Zum letzten Wort an dich, den stummen Toten, deiner Asche vergeblich letzte Liebesgabe. Denn die Macht, die schenkt und nimmt zurück, hat dich, armes Bruderherz, entzogen meinem Blick. Doch ach, die Gaben, Erbschaft alter Zeit und als zu karger Grabschmuck kaum geschätzt, nimm sie doch hin, vom Bruders Tränen geweiht. Gruß dir nun, Bruder, und leb wohl zuletzt.
Thank you, Manfred. It's terribly difficult to say Vale. Very difficult. I still am not able to quite think about Jerzy in the past. Thank you, Manfred, also for making us aware that Jerzy was a very specific kind of historian and archivist who made history and whatever he found in the sources something of immediate and life importance, that it never was dead past for him. It was always a living past. Thank you, Manfred. Thank you very much. Professor Peter Holland, can I ask you now for a few words? Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you for the invitation. I'm going to try to complement what others have done by taking a different tack. And I'm going to talk very directly about some of Jerzy's published work, because for those of us who are scholars, as much as we remember him as an individual, his books, his articles sit on our shelves and on our desks, and that's where I want to focus. And I'm going to start, I hope appropriately enough, excuse me, with a short article that he published in 1999 in the Festschrift for J. Hallio. It's called A Polish Gentleman's Visit to the London Theatres in 1820 to 21. And it translates for the first time some accounts of productions of, among other plays, Richard III and Hamlet and Othello, all starring Edmund Kean. The diary entries were written by Karol Sienkiewicz, and I'm sorry that my Polish pronunciation is so poor. Sienkiewicz was then deputy librarian of the great library in Puławy, belonging to his employer, Prince Adam Czartoryski. And the purpose of his trip was to buy books and manuscripts for that library. But encouraged by the landlady of the house he was staying in, he did what any tourist might do and went to the theatre. But he didn't go to the theatre only because he was a tourist. He had, he wrote, I quote, been anxiously waiting to see Shakespeare's tragedies in London. I remember last year the Prince, when the subject of tragedy came up, said that he would like me to see some London productions. So dutifully, having read some of the plays beforehand and carrying a copy of the play with him to the theatre when he could, so that he could follow along, off he went. Now, I'm not going to spoil your pleasure by quoting from the diary entries further, simply to encourage you to read them or reread them, detailed, informative, awkward, funny, moving though they are. My reasons for choosing this piece as my starting point are twofold. The first is that Jerzy so clearly enjoyed the opportunity to present these diary entries to the Anglophone world. I've always had that same sense when I've read his writing over many decades. Unlike so much that is published, which can seem highly professional, very accomplished, full of perception, but devoid of delight, Jerzy always loved to be exploring whatever material he was writing about, and he wanted his readers to enjoy it with him. That is a crucial, central part of his work as a scholar and critic, not simply sharing his discoveries, his thinking, his discriminating understanding of why some production matters, but always also the excitement and pleasure that, for example, seeing Roberto Ciuli's 2007 production of King Lear gave him, and that he wants us to share with him. In our current academic climate for the humanities, defensive, embattled, nervous as it is, and consequentially adopting a style of pseudoscientific formality from which emotion always seems to have been banished, reading Jerzy reminds me what makes our work worthwhile, that there is joy in following his intellectual voyages of discovery and his reports of those forays, trips into the archives, into the theatre, into theory, and into practice, for that gentle, smiling style of being in the world of scholarship. We owe him so much. But the other reason is a different kind of journey, for at the core of so much of his work were always cross-cultural encounters of one set of perceptions in performance and another in reception, meeting each other. In this example, it was the spectator traveling and seeing Kean on stage in London. In Gentlemen of a Company, published in 1985, can it really be 36 years ago? His exploration of the English comedians, it's about their travels from place to place. Characteristically, he organized the book by location rather than, say, chronologically or by company. It is, as it were, the audience that takes precedence. The citizens of Elbing or Warsaw, of Livonia or Gdansk, of Bohemia or Königsberg. Yes, of course, there's a chronological list of the various companies' visits in an appendix, but that's not where his focus lies. Instead, it's the complex, delicately charted social, political, cultural, and civic interactions between the impending and then the actual arrival of the actors and the civic authorities, the theatre spaces, and not least, the audiences, including a lot of attention to the cost of admission. Just why did it cost 2 groschen to see a visiting show in Gdansk in 1619 and 9 groschen in 1636, a rise of 450%? Now, to say that the book is brilliant is only to state the obvious. 35 years on, I still turn to it regularly as I think about early modern touring in England and across Europe, or work on the ways in which English early modern drama began its European life. Nothing published since by others has done more than build on the knowledge base and the ways of understanding the archival record that Jerzy created there. The book's ongoing influence, often cited, never in my experience criticized, is in and of itself testimony to his enormous and powerful presence in the field, a presence that was, like our experience of him as a friend and colleague, always genial and generous, always open-minded, always provocative in the very best ways. He was, for me, a gentleman in our company, the company of Shakespeare scholars, and we delighted in the honor of having him among us. As a scholar of European early modern theatre history, he has had few to rival his accomplishments. I suggested just before that Jerzy's academic style of writing was always joyful and personal, but it was also rigorous. In his preface to the 2010 book, The Chemistry of Theatre, he states that at the outset that it is his, I quote, firm belief that the study of theatre may rid itself of subjectivity and be scientific, end quote. But as he goes on to make clear, this is based on the concept that, I quote again, the opinions expressed and the conclusions drawn are verifiable both through the internal logic of the argument and even more importantly, by the performances themselves, end quote. But that doesn't license him ever to be boring. Take the title itself, The Chemistry of Theatre. It's a playful allusion, as he tells us, to a tradition of titles that used one or other of the nouns, or indeed both, as with Elias Ashmore's 1652 treatise, Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, with its elaboration as a volume, as the title page puts it, containing several poetical pieces of our famous English philosophers who have written the Hermetic mysteries in their own ancient language. Jerzy's project was to set out the elements of theatre and how they combine and act under different chemical conditions. So the chapters enjoy in their titles, toying with the analogy to the science of chemistry, reading the element and compounds, the chemical formulas of blending, chemical reactions or blending the components. As in part 2 of the book, he moves from the chemistry of the theatre into what he dubs the chemical laboratory. The dominant word is now sculpting. Sculpting the space, sculpting the time, sculpting the language, sculpting the body. But teasingly, chemistry is still present. Sculpting the space or the retorts at play. Of course, he's still concerned above all with Shakespeare, but in productions by dozens of directors from dozens of countries. And as he guides us to understand not what a production means, but how it creates its meanings, and I know of no better guide to that process, so the riches of his enormously wide-ranging knowledge emboldens and equips his readers, teaching us to think about these things for ourselves. At the end of the book, Jerzy summed up his project. I quote again. "It remains my hope that I have managed to set out the rudiments for the study of time. Even if the answers reached are not always satisfactory to all, I like to think that Shakespeare would agree with me that it is our duty to defend our right to ask questions. In none of his works does he provide ready solutions to the questions asked, but he stresses the importance of asking them." End quote. Now, being a humanist used to mean one's engagement with those areas of knowledge, often literary, but never exclusively so, always secular, kept apart from theology by definition. Our field of work, the humanities, was from the Renaissance onwards, both human and humane. We, like Shakespeare and like Jerzy, want to keep asking questions, never providing glib answers, following the way he has guided us in Shakespeare's company and will continue to do so. I miss him and hope, as I wasn't able to do a few years ago, one day to visit Gdansk at last, to see the city he loved so much. Saddened that I shall have to do so without him, missing his company greatly. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Your energetic, passionate, and how shall I put it, almost joyful delivery made us aware how much joy we owe, all of us, to Jerzy. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Dear Sony, can I ask you now to say a few things about Jerzy and his scholarship? Thank you. You have to unmute your mic. We don't hear you.
Yes, sorry about that.
Okay.
I would like to share my screen. Can you give me the permission? I'm still disabled.
Please wait a second.
Yeah, okay. So in the meantime, I would tell you that I would like to make a mix of biographical, autobiographical, and scholarly reflections on Jerzy and myself, unfortunately or fortunately. Yes, now I can share my screen, and I would like to start with my last meeting with Jerzy, which was in 1913 at the Shakespeare Festival and Conference. And I think about us in this company, only Manfred was present there. And here are a few pictures of the conference, which I very fondly remember in this beautiful town hall. Jerzy is standing there. Here's a more close-up on him, and I was delighted with the kind of scenario or scenography, how the conference was organized, the students clad as almost actors, giving directions in the building, etc., etc. And one of the highlights of that event was when we visited the building site of the theater, which was not ready in 13. It was supposed to open in 14. And here are some of my photographs from that period. You can see the theater in the making. And at this point, Jerzy very enthusiastically explained the plan that it should be an open and a closed theater at the same time, so it can be a public theater or a private theater according to the plans of the performance. This is Jerzy showing us around the building, and he was showing the will-be dressing rooms, etc., etc. Unfortunately, since then I have not been in Gdańsk and could not see the completed theater. But my sister worked for, my daughter worked for a few months in Gdańsk in 2019, and she made these two photographs of the completed theater. This photograph I actually used in the memorial volume in my paper for Jerzy, which was published last year. So that was the last meeting. But let me turn to the first meeting. I got to know him. And for that, I copied the brief biography of Jerzy from the internet. And with red, I mark those things in which our lives or our interests kind of crossed each other. He was born in 1950. I was born in 52. He graduated in Poznan in 75. I graduated in Szeged in 77. And as two young scholars, we first met at the Folger Shakespeare Library, same year, same circumstances, what we have already heard. I had a scholarship there in 86, 87, he in 87, 88, and in the summer of 87, we had a few weeks overlapping our scholarships and had very, very pleasant talks, conversations, scholarly and personal, in the library itself, the famous 4 o'clock teas when everybody has to leave the library and just go to have tea and cakes, or in the guest houses in which Jerzy was staying. So those of you who know the Folger remember these little houses, which are the guest apartments of the Folger. What else were we talking about? One particular thing, and that was Gdańsk 1980. Why? Because apparently I worked in Warsaw at the University of Warsaw for 2 years from 1980 to 82 as a Hungarian lecturer. And apparently in 1981, I visited Gdańsk when the memorial of the victims of the 1970 strike, the 3 huge crosses many of us know, was inaugurated. So obviously we could talk a lot about my experiences in Solidarity times in Warsaw and Gdańsk. Then we kind of parted, and I wouldn't dare to call him my friend because it was a very sporadic kind of relationship, what we continued after that. But obviously I was watching out for his scholarly output. And I must tell you that Jerzy became a kind of an envied role model for Hungarian scholars for his successes, because before him, we imagined that a scholar from the socialist countries could never publish a scholarly monograph in Britain. And actually, there was one exception for that, Jan Kot, who already was very well known, and we admired Jan Kot. But he was a well-established scholar, and then comes young Jerzy Limon and publishes with Cambridge University Press twice in following years. So that was a sign of encouragement that maybe not everything is lost in the socialist camp, and we could eventually break into World Shakespeare or Renaissance scholarship. I will come back to that in a second, but what I wanted to know, Bielorib, I will come to that later. So very quickly, Gentlemen of Company was a fairly specific work which concentrated on Poland, and it could be applying to the interest of English scholars because it was bringing news from an alien territory. But the really interesting book, and up to today is one of my favorite readings by him, is The Dangerous Matter. Dangerous Matter is a very, very interesting book and groundbreaking, especially if we contextualize it in the time when it was written. Early 80s, we are in the border area when structuralism is developing into post-structuralism. Even such giants like Umberto Eco is turning from semiotics to post-structuralist hermeneutics and things like that. And if we open Jerzy's book and read the kind of methodological introduction in the book, we find the following interesting sentences. He says that from our point of view, a writer's intentions are irrelevant to a critical analysis of a literary text. This is pure structuralism and reminds us of Roland Barthes, the author is dead, etc., etc. And then he continues. This is exactly the area of the censor because we have to turn our interest towards the reception, towards the audience reception. And he, as a political agent, he brings in the censor. So censorship, basically, this is the beginning when censorship studies, reception studies, the politics of reception started. And I think that Jerzy was just in the middle of that transition from one important theoretical trend to another. On the next page, he is giving a scheme which reminds us very much of the Jacobsonian scheme of how is it called, from author text to audience. It's the communication model, that's what I wanted to say. And this communication model refers to denotation and connotation, so all sorts of associations which go with that. And this is structuralism. But then on the next page, he further develops this scheme, and he says that the author's text actually goes to the performing company, to the hands of the interpreters, and this is how it gets to the spectator. And basically, there is a multiplication of meanings and multiplication of denotations and connotations. And basically, I think that this on a theoretical plane shows the modernity and the kind of absolute up-to-dateness of this book. There's one more interesting thing in the book, but let me turn to Wieloryb now. When I heard about the publication of his novel, I wrote to him and asked for a copy. Of course, at that time, I had no idea that there would be an English translation, and I'm sorry to say I still haven't seen the English translation. But he was kind enough to send me the Polish version, the Polish copy, in which I regret he didn't write anything for me. So I don't have an author signed copy, but I still preserve the envelope in which he sent me the book. And that's his handwriting with his own home address on it as sender. Now, why this book made me so excited? As you know, this is a huge palimpsest of all sorts of mixture of various styles and authored fragments and everything else. And in the back of the book, there are fictitious reviews. So probably all of you know the framework. I'm not repeating it because my time is practically out. That one of these fictitious reviews says that this postmodern novel is in the company of Tristram Shandy or Borges or Umberto Eco or Milorad Pavic. And these are my favorite authors. My generation was very much on this kind of postmodern, fragmented, palimpsest kind of literature. So I was very much excited to receive this book. And as much as my Polish allowed me, I kind of worked through it myself. And to my greatest pleasure, I found this kind of illustrations in it. This is Robert Flood's famous mystical. Okay, I said it for 10 minutes and I know that I'm over. So I'm finishing immediately if I manage to switch off this class. So Robert Flood, or the Ashmole's Chemical Theater, which Peter Holland quoted a few minutes ago. So this is my field of interest, and I was extremely excited about it. And finally, why I think this is so interesting, because as a postmodern mind, Jerzy was fixed on either spatial or time hubs. And the dangerous matters is like that. This is about 1 year of theater, the theatrical season in London in 1623-24. Now, these novels he wrote, including the Ursa Major, are fixed on places, Gdańsk, Gdynia, Słupsk, and that area, and somehow building up a mosaic or building up a kaleidoscope around those hubs. And I think that this is extremely interesting and fascinating. So much about his writing and scholarship. And the last point I would like to make is my regret that I never managed to lure him to Hungary. I was regularly organizing iconology conferences, and he always politely evaded to come, but finally he sent us Agnieszka Kołodziejska, who is now called Żurawska, one of his students, and she came to Szeged and she gave a paper at one of our conferences. And I also tried to lure him to a Shakespeare festival in Hungary. Some of you may know about it. In the meantime, I switch off my shared screen, and this is the Gyula Shakespeare Festival. I don't know if any one of you have ever visited there, in that wonderful medieval castle. And we very much wanted Jerzy to come. And he always said that he's too busy with Gdańsk, so he cannot come to Gyula. And in the meantime, the main organizer of the Gyula festival 2 years earlier than Jerzy also died. And somehow the whole enterprise is now going down. I very strongly hope that Gdańsk will not go down. Wish all successes, and will keep the beloved memory of Jerzy.
Thank you, Gert. Thank you, Gert. Thank you for bringing forward Jerzy's prose writings. I think he's a great artist of prose. And what I particularly enjoy about his books is how lightly he how deeply he knows and understands all literary theory, and how lightly he's able to touch it and play with it. That's really a great achievement. Very rare, I must say. People are usually too serious about theory and fine arts, whereas he had this lightness of touch. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you for being here.
Now, I think, Tomasz Wiśniewski, it's your turn now. And it's a very important turn in our discussion, because we are closing in on Gdańsk, the place of Jerzy. And we shall have an insight into Jerzy's work there, in place, so to say, to experience him in Gdańsk. Yes, Tomek.
Marta, thank you so much for your invitation to this panel. I feel very honored to join you here, especially that I work at the University of Gdańsk, and I now run the division of performing arts, which was created by Professor Limon, and who kindly asked me a couple of years ago to take it over and to continue his work. And I would like to speak about a slightly different legacy of Professor Limon's work, the dimension of his work at the University of Gdańsk, creating not only a new chorus, but also a new division here. But first of all, I would like to say that I know Professor Limon from a very different way than other people here. I was not his student at when I was a student at the University of Gdańsk. I didn't have the chance to participate in his lectures or classes. But fortunately enough, when I wrote my PhD dissertation, Professor Limon was my reviewer, as my Professor Marta Kibińska was at that time. And it was the first time when really I had the chance and pleasure and honor to get some feedback about my work from Professor Limon. And since then, I have to say that even though I was not a student, I deeply felt enormous intellectual generosity on his part and full support in variety of activities that I conducted. Some of them academic ones. I will return to this later on, but also ones. I will never forget his support for the idea that was created concerning the festival, small festival in the city of Sopot, which was conducted and which had always the full support of Professor Limon, who would not disturb me during the festival, but a day after, he would always phone me saying, "Tomek, how was it? I think it was all right." I think that it is quite important to stress his sense of awareness when you need the support, when you are tired, and when it is finished. And I really appreciate it now more than ever, his support in this dimension. But what I would like to concentrate on is a certain revolution, I think, that occurred thanks to Professor Limon in the city of Gdańsk, and sort of cultural map of the city of Gdańsk, and broader dimension of three cities, Trójmiasto, the cities that were mentioned, Gdańsk, Gdynia, Sopot, because I think from the perspective of the community of theater goers and theater scholars who work here, we certainly feel that Professor Limon not only created the theater, not only created the festival, which brings fantastic companies from over the world, but also established Gdańsk and studies and theater practice here in a global perspective. As a younger colleague, I always felt enormous support at the initial stage when I met scholars whenever in the world. And I said, I'm from Gdańsk, University of Gdańsk, and immediate response was, okay, we know about the theater that is either being built or is planned, or in recent years, which is reality, Shakespearean theater, of course. And it was always, the beginning of the conversation, either at Oxford or in London, or in different places like the Sibiu Festival in Romania. I met people who either have been here or wanted to come to Gdańsk and to experience, to get some sense of Shakespearean new building. As I remember my colleague Ricardo for Philippines, who constantly dreamed of coming here to Shakespearean Festival. For us here, I think Professor Limon brought cosmopolitan dimension to theater studies. Nothing was out of reach. I think that for him it was quite important to bring here and let us watch performances from the world which otherwise would not arrive here. You have to appreciate the fact that as a community of theater goers in Gdańsk, we had the chance to watch Peter Brook's Hamlet. We had the chance to watch Hamlet by the Globe at the beginning, when the theater, when the Gdańsk Shakespearean Theater was opened. And for me personally, that was extremely, it was profound experience when I had the chance to watch Luke Percival's Front, and I think it was enormous honor to me that I was asked to conduct the conversation with actors then. And after this, Professor Limon came to me and said, Tomek, I saw you after the show, and I know it was a profound experience. You were, and he was right, of course. I mean, he really, looked at me after the show and recognized the kind of experience it was. for me personally. Then I would like to mention that Professor Limon also brought to inspiration to his colleagues, as certainly Jerzy, you mentioned Agnieszka Żukowska, who follows studies in Shakespeare in an excellent way. Also, and this is something that is quite personal. I think that for a scholar of theater, scholar from Gdańsk, you know, to hear this famous, why don't you just write to the company and ask them about the questions you've got. Then when I started my interest in Théâtre de Complicité, he said at one point, when I complained, I can't find any books on this, on this company, I can't find any articles, not many articles or interviews. He said, so why don't you write a book about this company, which seemed to me at first a rather impossible thing. And finally, in 2016, I managed to complete this book before that time. And certainly, Professor Limon's word was inspiration. Sometimes I think that it's like quite, it was quite, I was sometimes, you know, a little bit scared to talk to him about distant dreams, because they turned into projects and then into reality. I think that that probably it's not more, I'm pretty convinced it's not only my experience, and it is not only the experience of a scholar, but certainly also of certain theater makers, that certain distant dreams of the conversation with him became reality, could be done. So I wanted to stress this, and one of my dreams was at one point to invite Marcello Mani, a co-founder of Complicité, Professor Limon, with his generosity and two-window theater run then by Alicia Brown, who was at the beginning in the previous panel, was done. Okay, so I think that that this dimension needs to be stressed. It's collective experience. I'm convinced that he was supportive to the community of theater goers here locally, but also to individual scholars, individual artists who could perform that and who could realize their dreams. And finally, at the very end, I would like to mention his legacy here at the University of Gdańsk. It's the Department of Performing Arts, a small group of people, but quite active, I think. And I hope that it is another dimension of his legacy, which will flourish, and which will get strong, which will continue to participate in international scholarship. And another achievement, another major thing at the University of Gdańsk, and my colleague Marta Nowicka knows something about this because she participated in creating this, is this new program, new course here, Arts Management, which was initially which was initially very strange thing here at the traditional English philology, in the English philology department. Professor Gibińska knows that it's not an obvious thing to have a course like this, to have a program like this in English philology department. But then I think it gathered practitioners, theoreticians, and I dare say also young people, students who are such creative minds, who are enormous hope for the future, and I'm pretty sure they will also take a lot of energy and a lot of progress from the achievement of Professor Limon here at the University of Gdańsk and the legacy that we want to continue. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tomek. It's breaking the walls, shaking the walls that he taught us to do. He refused to be fettered by anything. Thank you very much. Now, our last contributor, Marta Nowicka, who has worked with Jerzy and with the theatre and has developed a very important, also for Jerzy, a very important branch of what theatre as a cultural center means for communities. Marta, your turn. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to listen to all of you, I must say. It's very emotional for us, and we are so grateful that so many people have so many beautiful things to say about our professor. So, yeah, let me start with a memory. When I came to Gdańsk Shakespeare Theatre about 12 years ago, I didn't know anything about education, anything about theatre, or about Shakespeare. Today, these three pillars are the most important elements of my life, not only professional, but also a basis of my own sensitivity and my own emotionality. When I came to the theater as this young student, I was afraid to even talk to Professor Limon, not knowing yet almost anything about his work, about what a man he was. I sensed this enormous respect others gave him and some kind of, I don't know, greatness that surrounded him. And I did not know then that I joined the team of greatest madmen and women, people who, united by a common passion, later became my theatre family under the leadership and care of Professor Jerzy Limon, and that he was so ready to perform miracles. I did not know how much I will learn from him and how much he will teach all of us. I was asked to speak today about education, and what I want to emphasize, this part of his life. Our professor was not only a scholar, he was also a teacher, both over theater and life. Sometimes I think he did not really separate one from the other. Shakespeare was not as an anachronistic artist for him. He was also not an exclusively elite artist, although professors saw such a place for him as well. But he saw potential in Shakespeare as a popular artist for common people. And he absolutely believed that everyone could find in his work something close to himself, to his heart, his soul. Something that resonates with our lives here and now. Let me give you one example that touches me till this day. We've created this one particularly beautiful project that became our department's most precious child and a source of professors' great joy. It's called Theatrical Solitaire. In this project, different groups participate: seniors, people with disabilities, and young people. And they all prepare a performance in their own local communities. We assign professional actors and directors to help them do that. The phenomenon of this project, however, is that all these three groups are preparing the same text, the same play. So at the end, they meet on the stage of our theater, they get to know each other, spend some time together, and then they perform their plays in front of each other and in front of a wide audience. And suddenly, magic happens. Imagine an old lady, 90 years old, plays the same role, speaks the same language, experiences the same emotions as a 13-year-old girl who performs immediately after her. And right after them comes a group with some kind of disabilities. And for example, a teenager with Down syndrome also plays the same role. They all experience basically the same thing, but each in their own way. Each of them filters the text, this role, through their own sensitivity, their own experiences. And by watching each other, they all understand that they have much more in common than they thought even a few hours ago. This is such a beautiful project. We have been implementing it for 6 years now, and during 1 year we can do 2 or 3 days such as this described by me, when those 3 social groups meet together. It already happened 16 times, 16 days like this, finales of the project. Sometimes we use texts from classic literature like Homer or Cervantes, but of course we devoted many editions to Shakespeare. Our professor insisted on doing all Shakespeare's plays in this project. And honestly, we were not really thrilled with this idea. After all, not all of the works of master from Stratford are suitable for such a project. Not all of them can be given to children, people with certain disabilities, especially mental one, intellectual one. During one of such conversations, professor asked me, which in my opinion are impossible to do. I replied that, for example, well, Titus Andronicus, Richard III, well, even Taming of the Shrew seems too difficult for me. They have too much violence, too much pain, and show too much harm that is being done to other people. Professor smiled, like he always did. He smiled, he thought for a moment, and he replied, Miss Marta, like he used to emphasize our names. Miss Marta, do you honestly think that elderly people have not experienced pain and violence in their lives? That people with disabilities do not know what it means to be hurt or humiliated? That young people don't struggle with anger and fear? Some of them may even know about it more than you think. Then he explained that the point is not to focus on scenes that literally portray violence, but you can choose plots, themes, other scenes that can portray many difficult but important topics. That people too rarely allow these groups to express themselves honestly on such matters. And this is the way, he said, it is possible to restore some human dignity. Shakespeare truly is for everyone. He also paid careful attention to the huge difference between function of professional and amateur art. He understood that where there is a creative space for amateurs, there is also a social and educational function of art. And in this space, there is no room for criticism focused strictly on the effect of their work. Because equally important, if not more important, is the process, is the human experience. This is why he always warned us about the ego and personal ambition of some professional artists. He said that a good, sensitive artist does not always have to be a sensitive person in private relations. And that in educational activities, we should always surround ourselves with people from the latter group. Thanks to this, we created a huge network of specialists, artists, educators who helped us spread this knowledge. And in the last few years, we have been able to conduct thousands of workshops, meetings with artists and Shakespeare lessons. We've also created about 15 educational projects for all social groups. We've trained teachers from all over Poland to make it easier for them to work with their students, so our experience can grow through future generations. And Professor was always with us, always understanding, always so proud of each and every success. He constantly looked for ways to make it easier for people to access the values that he considered most important, such as honesty, humanity, and his enduring faith in miracles. He truly appreciated the value of education. He knew that experiences in this field build future sensitive theatrical audiences. Therefore, whenever we came to him with an idea, we could count on his full support. And he always told us, your role is to do the best project you can. My role is to make it possible for you. I pray that his strength will stay with us. Dear Professor, we miss you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta. Thank you for discovering before us yet another face, another dimension of this man who should have never disappeared from our life. I would like to thank you all, my dear friends, to be here, to talk about Jerzy, to exchange the ideas, the memories, all those reminiscing, because it's a sort of comfort in the moment in which we know he's not here anymore. I must say that I keep seeing in front of me the great ceremony of the first opening of the roof of the theater, mentioned here many times. And I hope this roof will keep opening and Jerzy will peep down and support us and smile with us and say thank you to all of us, as we say thank you to him. Thank you all. Thank you very, very much.